help you remember your trig ratios. Your trig functions are sine, cosine, and tangent. So you should never write out SOHCAHTOA unless you put it like at the top of your paper as a reminder. You should write out sine of x equals whatever your ratio is. Or cosine of x equals whatever your ratio is. Or tangent of x equals whatever your ratio is. And for those of you who don't know, those are number signs, not hashtags. Okay? So we've got sine of x equals number over number. Cosine of x is number over number. Tangent of x is number over number. All right? Not so x or ka or toa. It's sine, cosine, tangent. And the reason we say sine instead of sin is because these are all abbreviations for the full word. Like clearly that only says tan, but the actual word is tangent. That only says costs, but the actual word is cosine. This only says sin, but the actual word is sine. So that's why we say sine instead of sin. Okay? All right. Let's go ahead and just look at your worksheets because that'll be easier than me trying to come up with example problems at 2:30 in the morning. So the first worksheet you've got on Monday looked like this. It said solving right triangles. If you need to pause the video and find this worksheet, that's fine. If you have it out, great. If you don't, if you want to just add this in your notes in your notebook, that's fine. We'll start simple and we'll just start with number 1. So anytime we're working with these, I see that I have a right triangle and I have one side and one angle. So if I looked at my chart, I have a right triangle, I have one side and one angle, and I'm looking for a missing side, so I know I'm going to have to do a trig ratio. So first thing I need to do is label my sides. Remember, we label them based off of the reference angle, and our reference angle here is this one. It's the 72 degrees. My hypotenuse is always directly across from my right angle, so I know that's H. This 6 right here is touching the angle that I'm given, so I know it's adjacent. Okay, at the top of my paper, I'm going to go ahead and write our handy dandy SOHCAHTOA. So I know if I have A and H, then my trig function is going to be cosine. So I have cosine of 72, because that's what my angle is, equals, and since it's AH, I know A goes on top, H goes on bottom. Okay. Now to actually solve this, we learned in class the other day that if x is on bottom, we're going to switch the places of our x and our trig function. So x equals 6 divided by cosine 72. I did not bring a calculator home with me on Friday because I did not anticipate not being there this week. So I don't have one right in front of me, but we spent all of class on Friday putting these in the calculator. So if you were not there, then get with a partner in class and have them show you how to do it. But you would literally put in your calculator 6 divided by, and then you click a little button that says trig. Okay, there's a button that says trig, and then you're going to click cosine, and a parenthesis will automatically pop up, and put in your 72. And whatever that gives you is your answer. It's that easy. We're done with that problem. Okay? So let's look at another one. Let's jump down here to number 6. No reason, I just randomly decided to jump there. So my reference angle is 51. Across from my right angle is always the hypotenuse. Across from my reference angle is always opposite. All right? So if I have O and H, and I look back at SOHCAHTOA, O and H comes with sine. So my trig function is sine. My angle is 51 degrees. O over H, which means 14 over X. So that's set up. And then to solve it, if X is on bottom, we're going to flip them. So X equals 14 over sine 51. So in your calculator, you would put in 14 divided by sine 51. And it's going to give you a number. And y'all can take this out to 2 decimal places. Oh, just kidding. I'll let you follow the directions on the paper. Round it to the nearest tenth. If you did 2 decimal places, because that's what I told you in class, that's perfectly acceptable too. If you did just 1, then that's fine. But remember how to actually round like you learned in middle school. Maybe even for that. I think you learned to round in like 2nd or 3rd grade. Let's look at number 5. All right. Across from our right angle is always the hypotenuse, but that doesn't matter to me here because I have no variable or number there. So I don't need the hypotenuse at all. My reference angle is 49 degrees. Right beside it, that's touching it, is the adjacent side. And the side across from it is always opposite. Okay? So this time I don't have my hypotenuse at all. I have my opposite and my adjacent. So if I look at my SOHCAHTOA, if I have opposite and adjacent, I'm going to have tangent. So tangent of 49, because that's what the angle says, equals O over A. So O was 14, A is X. Okay. Same thing, if X is on bottom, flip them. We've got X equals 14 over tangent 49. Okay. So to solve it, you're going to put in your calculator 14 divided by tangent 49. And whatever that gives you is your answer. So when you're looking at these guys, these are sides. So you know your hypotenuse has to be longer than your sides, right? So if this side is 6, you know X is going to be more than 6. If you get something less than 6, you know you're wrong. Down here, we have 14. So we don't know if this is going to be more or less than 14 because they're both legs, but we know it should be pretty close to that, right? Because this angle is 49, and we know that when it's 45, 45, these are the same size. 49 is not too far from 45. So if this side is 14, this should be somewhere between at least 11 and 16, right? So if you get something that's like 27, or if you get something that's like 1, then you know you're wrong because it's sides of a triangle, and you should be able to look at, okay, that makes sense. That's a side that would make sense for that. This one over here, if this is 14, you know this has to be bigger than 14 because it's your hypotenuse. Okay? Let's look at the back side of that worksheet, see if there's any we want to look at. Let's do number 12. Okay. Across from our right angle is always the hypotenuse. The side we're given X is across from our reference angle, so it's got to be opposite. So we wrote on the front of our worksheet SOHCAHTOA, and if I have O and H, then I've got to use sine. So sine of 21 equals X over 22, because it's O, which was X, on top of H, which is 22. Okay. If X is up high, then we're going to multiply. So we're not switching them like we did on these. We're going to multiply. So I'm going to have 22 times sine 21. Whatever that gives you in your calculator, 22 times sine 21, and that's your answer. Okay? I'm looking at the other problems. I'm not just frozen. They really gave y'all, this worksheet has a lot where your hypotenuse is the x. All right, I think that worksheet, you should be pretty set up now with the 4 that we just did. So we did number 1, we did number 5, we did number 6, and we did number 12. Okay? So there's only 16 problems. I did 4 of them for you. That's a 25% right there. So you can go back and watch that part if there was any of those that you needed to get. Now let's look at the worksheet you got on Tuesday. At the top it said inverse trigonometric ratios. Okay. This first part, it says find each angle measure to the nearest degree. So remember, we talked about if your variable comes right after your trig function, that means you're looking for the angle. The only difference with this 1 through 8 is instead of giving you a ratio like we've been doing, like the 5/3 or the 12/8 or whatever ratio we had, they've already put the ratio into decimal form. Okay, so to find each angle measure, this is a simple put it in your calculator problem. You would have sine to the -1, which is when you click on the trig button, you have sine at the top and sine to the -1 underneath. So that's the inverse of sine, and then it gives you parentheses. And instead of putting in a fraction like we've been doing, you're just going to put that decimal in. And it's going to give you some number. And this one says you can round it to the nearest degree, which means if the answer's 30.9, then tell me it's 31 degrees. If the answer is 72.1, tell me it's 72 degrees. Okay? All of these, that's all you're doing is cosine to the -1 and then put your decimal in there. That's the inverse of those functions, and that's all you have to do. Put them in your calculator, use the inverse, get a number. So 1 through 8 on that should be super easy. It's just buttons in your calculator. This right here is showing your work. That's all there is to it. That is your work. It's showing me that you're doing the inverse of sine or the inverse of cosine. So let's look at the triangle problems. We'll just start with number 9. So your reference angle on these is wherever your question mark is. You want to label your sides based on the angle you're looking for. So if I'm looking for, there's more fuzz on the table, sorry. If I'm looking for this angle, then this side is opposite and this side is touching it, so it's adjacent. So if I have O and A, go ahead and write out my acronym again. If I have O and A, then I've got tangent. So the tangent of X, because that's the side the angle I'm looking for, I don't know what it is 27 over 38. That's my ratio. So to solve it in the calculator, you would do the inverse of tangent and put your ratio in there. And whatever the calculator gives you is your answer. Okay? Let's look at number 12. Remember, I want to label based on my reference angle. So across from my reference angle is opposite. Across from my right angle is always the hypotenuse. So if I have O and H, then I'm going to have sine. So sine of x, O is 40, H is 42. Okay? So in your calculator, sine to the negative 1, which is the inverse of sine, and then put your ratio in there. And it's going to give you your answer. That was number 12. Okay. So all the way up through number 18, they only gave you 2 sides. But then suddenly at 19 through 24, you've got all 3 sides. And if you have all 3 sides, you get to choose which trig function you want. Okay? It's not like on the ones we just did, we had to use tangent because all we had was O and A. On this one, we had to use sine because all we had was O and H. But once I get to 19, if I label all of my sides, across from my right angle is H, across from my angle of reference is O, and the side that's touching my angle is A. I've got all 3. So if you have a favorite, pick it. If you want to mix it up, mix it up. So let's say we do cosine. Cosine of x, because I don't know what my angle is, you just have to make sure you pick the right side. So if I used cosine, then I have to use A on top of H. So A is 48 and H is 50. Okay? We could have done sine. Let's say we did sine of x. That would be O on top of H. Or we could have done tangent. That would be O on top of A. All 3 of those are correct. All 3. It doesn't matter which one you pick. If you did the first one and your neighbor did the second one and their neighbor did the third one, that's perfectly fine. You should all still get the same answer. Okay? So to put that in your calculator, for any of those, you're just going to do the inverse. So cosine to the negative 1 is 48 over 50. Or sine to the negative 1 is 14 over 50. Or tangent to the negative 1 is 14 over 48. Put any of those in your calculator and you should get the right answer. Okay. We'll do one more that's got all of them. So across from my reference angle, this number 22, is always O. Across from my right angle is always H. And the side that touches my reference angle is A. So let's say I do sine of x equals O over H. Okay. So the inverse of sine, and then put your ratio in there, and the calculator will give you your answer. Yes, you need to try to do 25, and yes, you need to do 26. Okay? You don't have to get out a ruler and actually measure 10 centimeters. You just need to draw and label it. But that should help y'all out at least some. I apologize for not being there this week. It was not planned. We will still get our test in over this, possibly on Friday. If we do it on Friday, it would be the second half of class, and it'll be a short test. But you have all of this now. You should have gotten this worksheet on Monday. So if you were absent, you need to find a copy of this on my desk or ask the sub if they see one. You should have gotten this worksheet Tuesday. So if you were absent, you need to find a copy or get one from the sub. And then everyone now should have this in your notebook. Because if we do take our test Friday afternoon, well, not afternoon, but Friday, the second half of class, I will allow you to use this on the test, and it should be pretty helpful. So if y'all have any questions, feel free to message me on Remind. The code for Remind is still up on the board. And I do get them like their messages, so I should see them pretty much instantly. And hope that helps. Y'all have a great day.